Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone to WEM's, the Wharton Esherick Museum's virtual space today. I'm Emily Zilber. I'm the Director of Curatorial Affairs and Strategic Partnerships. I'm thrilled for you to join us today for our curator conversation with Mark Sfirri, one of the co-curators of the exhibition Daring Design, the impact of 3 women on Wharton Esherick's craft, amongst many other things, who I'll introduce to you guys in just a moment. I'd like to ask folks to mute themselves if they haven't done so already. Before we get into today's program, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming virtual programs that we have that we hope that you will join us for. Today's program is one of several we're doing in conjunction with Daring Design that will be on view at the Michener through February. We have a number of talks, including programs with Mark's co-curator, Laura Igo, and spotlight talks available on our website. So I hope you'll check those out. Our next spotlight talk is perfect for the holiday season. We're going to be focusing on the gifts Esherick created for friends and family, and a few given to him as well. And we'll make sure there's a link in the chat to that. The call for our 28th annual juried woodworking exhibition is out in celebration of our 50th anniversary in 2022. We're focusing on conventional and unconventional self-portraits in celebration of Esherick's home and studio as really his ultimate act of self-portraiture. You can find information on all of these things on our websites. I hope you'll come and visit us now that we're open again to the public. In addition to our regular tours, we have a great installation in the Visitor Center, Stories from the Archives, as well as our artist installation, Roberta Massage, Artist in Residence. I'm so pleased to welcome Mark to the Esherick Museum again today. Mark is the co-curator of Daring Design, which explores the significant impact of 3 women, Helene Fischer, Hanna Weil, and Marjorie Content, on Esherick's career and artistic development. Mark received his BFA and MFA in furniture design at the Rhode Island School of Design. He specializes in multi-axis spindle turning, an area that he's been exploring in depth since the early 1990s. He's professor emeritus at Bucks County Community College, where he ran the fine woodworking program from 1981 to 2017. Mark's also been researching Esherick since 2006 and has authored or co-authored 8 articles, which we will make sure to link to on his website. In addition to his role as co-curator on Daring Design, he served on the curatorial team for Wharton Esherick and the Birth of the American Modern, an exhibition and symposium held at the University of Pennsylvania in 2011. So amazing, amazing knowledge and experience about Esherick here. Our format is a little different today than it is for our typical curator talks. Mark is actually going to begin with a 15-minute presentation, and then I'll ask him a few questions, and then we will have time for questions and conversation from folks who are here today. After, during the presentation and conversation, please feel free to put any questions in the chat throughout. My colleague, Katie Nguyen, will answer them as best as she can. And if it's a question that we think Mark has something to say about, we will hold that for after, so we will get your questions answered. And if you haven't put yourself on mute, please do so now. And without further ado, Mark, welcome to the Wharton Esherick Museum.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Emily and Katie, and thanks to the Wharton Esherick Museum for hosting this, and to all of you for participating. I was asked to talk about how Esherick has influenced my career as a woodworker and how I became a researcher in 15 minutes. Sounds like more of a many-hour discussion, but I'll see what I can do. I've added some research as well. So let me proceed. In January of '72, I had my first majors class in the furniture program at RISD. Coincidentally, the inaugural exhibition of the Renwick Gallery opened that same month. Nakashima, Maloof, Esherick, Carpenter, and Castle were names that I was not all that familiar with before then, but these 5 were deemed the top of the studio furniture makers in the country, so I needed to see the work in person. While there was certainly a lot of amazing work there, when I came upon this piece, it stopped me in my tracks. My reaction was that anything was possible in wood. It instantly became one of my top 10 art experiences. If I wasn't sold on being a woodworker before that day, I certainly was after seeing this desk. Well, I was well trained in museum protocol. I looked around and I saw my opportunity to slowly open and then close one of the drawers inside the desk. That sealed the deal for me. 35 years later, I got to revisit the piece, spend a day with it, photograph it, and try every drawer. It was yet another top 10 art experience. I wrote an article titled Anatomy of a Masterpiece for Woodwork magazine based on that visit. Meanwhile, here I am in my college days in the wood shop. And my first piece of furniture, completed in the winter of '72, started right after the visit to the Renwick. A technical, for me, tour de force with 3 types of dovetails, mortise and tenons, carving and bending wood. It was a departure from symmetry with my first piece, due in part from seeing the desk. What I learned from visiting the Esherick Museum was that his creativity extended beyond furniture and included sculpture, architecture, painting, and printmaking. For me, it was a blueprint for my creative life. It was okay to take what I call a Big Bang Theory approach to creativity as opposed to a linear one. Constantly changing directions with the freedom to explore different paths when the spirit moved me, as it did him. I don't think that my reaction to that studio visit was all that unusual or different from many people that have been there. With the 2006 Rago Art and Auction sale in Lambertville, New Jersey, I got a glimpse into Esherick's trip to Holzhausen, Germany in 1931, his second and final trip to Europe, and knew nothing about Hanna Weil. This sale inspired me to write an article for Woodwork magazine titled Esherick Emerges, and my research began. I had been writing for this publication about design in my own work, so I had this connection in place for writing articles. The sale also sparked my interest in more serious research into Esherick. The sale included photographs, drawings, prints, and wood, and a lot of personal items. I recognized that there were collectors who had stories to tell, and I wanted to see the work and interview the people before collections got broken up. This is one of the pieces that was in that sale. Esherick made this desk by himself, 1925 to 1927, on the left, this stand-up desk that's in the museum, overlapping with the years of construction of his studio. Like the folding screen in the previous slide, the influence was arts and crafts. It is what one could consider to be his journeyman's piece, a demonstration of his learned techniques from his, quote, apprenticeship. He vowed, however, after making it, that he would not build furniture anymore. He would have others do that. He would focus his efforts on design. So my big question came up is, how did Esherick make that leap from the design of the drop leaf desk to the dining set on the right in 1 year? And there are 2 answers to that. One is John Schmidt, who was his engineer and builder of furniture from that point on. And the other was his exposure to anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy. And having a little trouble seeing my notes here. It changed his design direction, and it freed him up with designing pieces that were beyond his ability to make. Sorry, I'm having to shift things around. A person that's in the, one of the people highlighted in the exhibition Daring Design is Helene Fischer. She was German-born, American industrialist, and was the owner of the Schutte and Curting Company in Philadelphia. She commissioned many pieces by Esherick over the years, 1930 to 1945, for her home and the boardroom of her company. And these are also the years that are highlighted in this exhibition, 1930 to 1945. Meticulously carved and with a much softer look than his 1928 dining set, Finale was purchased by Helene Fischer in 1929 at Hedgerow. Carving was Esherick's primary interest in wood. Helene Fischer's first Esherick commission was this cabinet, which served as a base for finale and to house the Fischer Victrola. It was scaled back from the wilder design of the dining set. In this early 1940s piece, the boardroom table for Schutte and Curting, you can see the shift from the angular style to more of an organic one. Edges are softened and the forms are curved, and it's asymmetrical. This is the style he would use nearly exclusively for the next 30 years. I am pleased that we got to borrow it from the PMA. It's been in storage for I don't know how many years, but I believe that this is the first time it's been on view. His larger tables always had interesting construction techniques and shaping techniques, and this is a real stunner. The next person is Hanna. I'm going to refer to her as Hanna. She had 4 names. She was born Johanna Speckner. When she married to Otto Weil, a painter, she was Hanna Weil, and then married York Fischer in 1932 and became Hanna Fischer. And then they divorced, and in 1950, I believe, she married Hugo Binder, and that was her last name from 1950 on. The Glass Palace in Munich was built in 1854. Beginning in 1889, it was the home of an annual 4-month-long contemporary German juried art and craft exhibition with over 3,000 pieces. I had heard about it and knew that this is where the connection was, but I did a lot of research to find out information about it. It occupied over 170,000 square feet. And here is a floor plan showing all 72 exhibition spaces. A printed catalog, 200 pages long, was published each year. Each artist was listed with each of their pieces in the show. Hanna participated 1928 to 30, and most artists, including Hanna, had 1 piece in the exhibition. Although Hanna's work represented only 1/3000th of the 1929 show, it did what it needed to do, and that was to get the attention of Helene Fischer. She wanted to meet her, buy the piece, and commission another. Fischer invited Hanna to come to the United States and make carved ivory pieces for her in the fall and winter of 1930 to 31, and she stayed with the Fischers. Helena also wanted her son York to study with Hanna, which he did at her home early in 1930. So this predates her coming to the United States. In 1931, an arson burned down the building, destroying all of the artwork 5 days into the exhibition, and it was never rebuilt. She didn't participate in the 1931 show. Helena sponsored a trip for Wharton to visit Hanna in the summer of 1931. And I have just a couple of details about that trip that I found interesting. So she lived in Uding, and I'll show you a map of where that is. And from there, they, I believe, took a train up to this city of Gothenburg or Gothenburg in Sweden, and they took a canal boat trip to Stockholm. Now, I can't be guaranteed that they did that whole trip, but I believe that to be a case. I'm going to mention Vadstena Castle, which is located right here, which is a stop that they made on the canal boat, and that they did go to Stockholm afterward. So I assume that that's how they got there. And then they also took a train to Norway, through Norway, so I assume that that's this trip. The canal boat that they took, this specific boat that they took was put into operation in 1931, so it could very well be that one. And you can still make this trip today if you're interested in a canal boat trip. Katie Wynn showed this sketch in her recent presentation on the left, and as soon as I saw it, I knew what it was, which is, there's a photograph of it, and it was a stop on the way. Esherick with his sketchbook, and it's called the Yurta Canal Boat, Yurta, which of course you wouldn't be able to write because Swedish is such an odd combination of letters, but it's G-O-T-A. G-O-T-A is pronounced Yurta. I'm not going to try to pronounce anything in Swedish. I'll just do the Americanized version of it. And so that's Esherick traveling on the canal boat. Here's a photograph on that trip of Wharton with Hanna. Hanna wrote about this piece, always sketching, or this is a quote from her, always sketching, on the train going through Norway, the fjords, saw this one scene with a boat, sketched it quickly. He then went home and made a woodcut out of it. It's amazing that it has the quality of the light. And so I assume that that's the trip from Stockholm to Oslo, or maybe another trip from Oslo south. And the title of this is Fjord. This print, the sketches in the collection of the Wharton Esherick Museum. So this is a lake. It's the 6th largest lake in Germany. It's 18 square miles, and it's people vacation there. But this is where Hanna lived, was in a small town called Utting, U-T-T-I-N-G. And you could look across the lake and see Kloster Ondex, which is a cloister named Ondex. And we're looking south. So if one wanted to go to Munich from there, you take the train up to here and over this way, and it's about 40 miles away. Here's an amazing vintage postcard that I found. Amazing because it's uncannily similar to Esherick's depiction of it that he sketched for making a print. And in the distance, you can see the cloister. And I believe this to be a ferry. There is a ferry that took people back and forth. And most of the other pictures that I've seen of the lake, it's small sailboats. So I believe that that's what that is. And there's also a railway down here. This is Esherick's depiction of a view very close to the same place where the previous image was photographed. He printed it the next year, 1932, as a standalone block print, and also as a repeat pattern on fabric for curtains for her. And here you can see the train. The ship is even heading in the same direction. I thought that was pretty cool. The single biggest project was building this work table, along with Hanna and York. Esherick designed it. There's a hole at one end of it for her vise for carving ivory. York studied art with Hanna beginning in late 1929 or early 1930. Wharton came to visit. He had, when Wharton came to visit that summer of 1930, oh, that's wrong, 1931, sorry. He had 2 amazing artists to be working with. So this is a photograph of York with Wharton. And then Esherick left in the fall of 1931. The following spring, York and Hanna were married. And they lived in her house until 1939 when they moved to the United States. Here's a Fischer family photo from 1936. Here's York, his wife Hanna, who was pregnant with their second child, Barbara. She was born 1937. And here's their son, York. And here's Helene Fischer with Adalbert, her husband, and the rest of the Fischer family. In 1937, Hanna was commissioned by Helene to make a dozen or so carved ivory placeholders for the dining table for large gatherings. She brought life to each of these animals and insects by giving them a little bit of motion or movement. These really need to be seen to be believed. Each are maybe 2 or 3 inches long in their longest dimension. Here's a group shot of 11. There are 11 here. And I showed a couple of these, this one and this one and this one, and also a pill holder that she made for her. In all, there are 30 pieces by Hanna included in the exhibition, most of which are ivory, but thereas cut paper and a few other things. This silver and ivory cigarette case shows Hanna's ability as a jeweler, incorporating a bas-relief carved ivory panel. It's a great blend of her drawing and carving skills along with her jewelry skills. In 1939, when they moved to the United States, Hanna and York's house was in Hilltown Township, about 10 miles from Doylestown. The house was in pretty rough condition when the Fischers moved there. No bathrooms, for instance, and the farmhouse was on 77 acres. Hanna and York's marriage was dissolving shortly after their arrival in the United States. With that came the end of her relationship with Helene Fischer. This left her to fend for herself in a foreign country with 2 young children. This is a shot that I took of that house. It's been immaculately restored, and it's a beautiful house. It didn't look like that back then. Wharton helped her out, working there for several summers. And here is Wharton. And there's a hole that he punched through the 18-inch thick stone wall to put in a window. And here's a photograph that I took of that window, which is still there. From the inside of the house, here's the living room, and that window is this one here. So it's in the pie staircase going to the 2nd floor, lighting up the space. And the recess is angled and kind of not perfectly rectangular, which is great, I think, but he had to build that whole, the depth of that whole thing. In this living room, Esherick laid this walnut floor, and it was installed around the same time that he laid his floor in his own dining room, around 1940, 41, somewhere in there, in this herringbone pattern. This 1940 addition to the World's Fair of 1939 in New York, titled Pennsylvania Hill House, was primarily featured Esherick's work, including a spiral staircase. But there's also an ivory fork and spoon, likely salad servers by Hanna, hanging on the back wall. Esherick had a lot of respect for her work as an artist and her opinion about art. Case in point, Hanna's comment about this piece. The actress had 2 arms, and we argued a lot about it. And I told him that he should cut the arm with the lipstick off, and he cut it off. That's from an interview, Bob Bascom with Hanna. As an outgrowth of the Daring Design Show, I was asked to write an article and do a Zoom talk about Hanna's artistic career for the Glencairn Museum. Both of these will be posted on the Glencairn website this month. In fact, they're also will be on my website, and the Zoom talk that I gave just about her work is posted there. A link to that is posted. Hanna was carried through the late 40s until the early 60s with carved wood figures that she made for nativity scenes that started a relationship with Raymond and Mildred Pitcairn from Bryn Athyn, who commissioned 3 sets from her that they gave to the Eisenhowers in the mid-1950s. They were displayed in the East Room of the White House from 1955 to 1960. They are now displayed at the Gettysburg Visitor Center every December since 2014. Here's a photograph of the Eisenhowers in the White House, and there's the first of the nativity scenes that the Pitcairns gave them. And my Pitcairn article spans Hanna's work from her early teenage years throughout her career. Shameless. I'm going to mention 2 other exhibits that are at the Michener, and 2 compelling reasons to visit the Michener: a Robert Beck painting retrospective with 80 paintings, and Miriam Carpenter's first solo museum exhibition. This is a stunning feather that she carved, very large. I can't remember the size of it, but I think about 18 inches. And that was purchased for the permanent collection of the museum. And there is a printed catalog of the Michener Esherick show with 3 essays that go into a lot of detail about the story and the connection of these 4 individuals. And it's available only at the Michener. And there you go. How'd I do? I went over, I apologize.
Mark, I don't know how you couldn't. Thank you so much for that whirlwind introduction to your research and to the work that you've done in putting this exhibition together.
Sure.
We had a chance to chat with Laura this past October, and in that conversation, Laura Igo, your co-curator,
yes,
And she had a chance to share some of the sort of big themes and goals for the project, especially around recentering these narratives of these important collaborators in Esherick's work and life. And I'm really, curious what your take is on why putting these three women sort of front and center is critical to how we understand Wharton Esherick in new ways.
Well, I guess that's also something that could be a long answer, but a few years back, a couple of directors ago at the Michener, I met the then curator, the then director, and I was the first time I met her, and I didn't have any plan in place. I was just thinking out loud, and I said, there are three women that are lived in this area, one of them 10 miles away, one of them 3 miles away, plus that were very influential into the early years of Esherick. At a time, 1930, right in the Great Depression, who the two patrons really helped him start his career, kind of launched it. And Hanna, and then the Fischer connection is that she had purchased a piece from Hanna Weil and Wharton the same year. So, that in 1929. And then, she was a major patron of hers for 10 years until the divorce. But for Esherick, it was 15 years. And I just thought that it made a lot of sense and that it was local and all that. But I didn't really have a plan laid out. It was just sort of a whim that I made the suggestion. And I'm just really glad. The family, Hanna's children, had a lot of the pieces of their mother's work. And I never saw it because at the time in the 2006, I was interested in Esherick. So that was my main focus. And, but they said they had these ivory pieces, and they sent me pictures, and the pictures just weren't very good. They were very kind of washed out, and they asked me if I would pitch it to the Michener Museum, which I did. I went and showed them to them, and they said, no, it's not worthy of them. And I kind of agreed. I just didn't think it was, that it was worthy of a show. And then years later, I visited her son York and saw the pieces in person, and that changed everything. And the photographs that you saw against the black background are photographs that I took. And I went back to the museum and said, I want to talk about Anna's work again. And they said, we already saw her work. And I said, well, just look at these pictures. And then the reaction was, yes, absolutely, this deserves a show. So it really, points to the fact that photography is so important. They were the same pieces. They weren't different. And so anyway, it mainly had to do with the fact that those three women were all involved with Esherick's career right at the beginning of his, furniture, launching his furniture career.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because there is this narrative for Esherick that often thinks, positions him as this sort of lone genius on the hill, and instead we have these core relationships, which is true for almost any artist, that there are influences in people and things that they come across that really shape the direction that their artistic career takes.
Right.
I think it's so interesting. You've already mentioned these relationships that you've been able to build with the families of some of the descendants of some of these folks through your work and through your research. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about, as a researcher, as somebody who is sort of thinking in a scholarly and critical way about Esherick, how do these kinds of connections enhance your understanding of the work that you're doing and the research subjects that you decide to take on?
Well, I'm a woodworker.
You are also a woodworker. You're many, many things.
That's really what I am. But I don't know. I just had this desire to learn more about Esherick, and I saw that opportunity open up with the sale at Rego. I just saw all this stuff. I'd been to the museum and I'd been through the tour, and it's amazing. And, I've been there 100 times, and every time I see something new. But finding out a story that's outside of the museum I just saw that maybe I could contact these people and start discussing other aspects of his life. And I really I was never trained as a researcher at all. And fortunately, one of my colleagues at Bucks County Community College, Roberta Mayer, got me to think more like a researcher. And I never, one funny thing happened. I was writing the article about the corner desk. I knew nothing about anthroposophy at the time, or Steiner, or how that entered the picture. And I was close to a deadline, and I showed her a picture of the corner desk. And I said, "Is this Cubist?" And her answer was, "Well, it depends. Who were her friends? What books was she reading? Where did he travel? All the things that one would think of as a researcher." Now, for me at that time, I thought, why can't you just answer the question? But, and then I asked a friend, another colleague of mine, Robert Dodge, I said, "Is this Cubist?" And he looked at it and he said, "Yep." And I said, "Okay, yeah, it's Cubist. That's it." But the words that Roberta said to me then changed my whole direction. I thought, okay, I need to get the bigger picture. I need to start pulling the thread, starting to see, things that I can find out about it. She and I worked together on the Journal of Modern Craft for the peer-reviewed article. So I got to see her in action. And, like for Marjorie Content, I guess it was a little easier because there is a book published on her biography. But Hanna Weil and Helene Fischer are much tougher if there weren't family members that are telling their stories. And I think the biggest thing and the interesting thing too is that Hanna's two children, York and Barbara, were the children of Hanna, but the grandchildren of Helena. So they were, even though Helena and Hanna had sort of parted ways, they're still connected to that family. So I found out a lot about the families through particularly Barbara, who sat down with me when I went up there to see the desk. I had pages of questions, and I taped an interview with her, and I, explain this to me, whatever. And, you try and be careful not to be too personal about it and whatever, just what can you tell me about this? Or what are the dates? So I could try to piece things together. And I have to say, a lot of that particular interview, just, I kept it. And it wasn't until I started writing for the article, the essay for this exhibition, I had to go back and check my sources, which was me interviewing her. And there's also another grandchild of Helena, Peter Cook, who is sort of the caretaker of all of the Fischer family history. And so he was a big help too. And I would, suggest something or write something, and he would tear it apart, say, no, this is what happened. This is what happened. So.
And now have all of the family members that you've worked with had a chance to see the exhibition?
Well, yes. I mean, unfortunately, Barbara Fischer Eldred died 5 years ago. And that's one of the things I feel bad about is that, this is the thing that she really wanted to have happen. And it's a shame that, the timing wasn't right, but she died in 2016. But yeah, a lot of them have. York, he's 86 years old, and he drove down from Maine to see the show, to come to the openings, and then the next day he headed back. So at 86, driving by himself. So
that's a gift that I think you've been able to give them, to bring all of these things together and to highlight these wonderful stories. I'm curious if there, is a specific object or story in the exhibition. We talked about the ivories, we've talked about some of the pieces of furniture, but any other sort of work or story that you are particularly excited to share with the Michener's audiences or with us here today? I'm curious what you've learned through mounting the exhibition that's staying on your mind.
Well, this is just a little thing, but this catalog, I had heard that that this is the connection. This is how they met. And I thought, well, what is this place, and how, this is the show of the year. It was 4 months up, and I don't think it was because they had to print the catalog. They have a lot of other things. As far as I know, it's the only thing that was happening at this amazing place. And I wanted to find out, and it's only a sentence in my essay, or I mentioned it today, that she participated 1928 to 1930. Well, how did I find that out? I thought, I have to find the catalogs, so I started with guessing at 1929 that that's the one. And then sure enough, I found her name. It's, the one listing, and it's broken up into different categories. So I had to really go through page by page. So it was sort of like a Christmas present come early when I would get one of these things and then go through it. And I thought, okay, well, was she in it in 1930? And I bought one of those catalogs, waited 2 weeks, and then it showed up. And yes, she was in it in 1930. Well, was she in it in 1931? And I got that one. And no, she wasn't in that one. And that had to do with the fact that she was in the United States making pieces. I don't think she had any inventory. And it was one of the fortunate things that she wasn't involved, because again, that was burned down by, from what I understand, maybe one of the artists who was rejected from the show burned it down. And the only thing that survived from that exhibition were the pieces that hadn't been picked up, that had been rejected. So that's kind of funny. So then I went back in time to 27, and both she and her husband, or 28, both of them were in it, Otto and her, and then 27, only Otto. And I thought, and then I had to buy another couple of years just to see it. So from 25 to 31. But it was just a really interesting thing for me to make that discovery and to be able to speak with authority about, what that was all about. And no, she didn't have 20 pieces in it. She had one, but again, it was just the perfect storm of the fact that Helene was there that year. And so these were, these are just amazing. And I love these things. And, it points out the connection of Hanna with Helene. This pillbox is maybe the last piece that she did for Helene. This is 1938. And it has, just to the right here are her initials, Hanna Fischer, Hanna Curting Fischer in this part. And then these are recessed carved areas for 3 days worth of pills. And that was a fun one. There are other things. This is one of Hanna's, there's 3 of these in the exhibition. These are cut paper from 1924 to 29. I don't know. There are so many things. The desk, the work table that he made, that Esherick made, the only piece made outside, as far as I know, the only Esherick piece made outside of the United States. And, I was pleased that we had that in the exhibition. That has so much history to it. And he made it all knockdown. And that really came in handy when they were trying to get the heck out of Germany ahead of World War II, and it was really close, them getting, or actually for Hanna and the children getting out. York was already over here, but she went back to get the kids. And, meanwhile, the war started and they had difficulty getting out of Germany. They couldn't, she wanted to get out, said, my husband's American living in the United States, and they wouldn't let her out. And then finally she got to Gothenburg, that same place where they took the canal boat, as a port that they could leave from. Unfortunately, 2 days or a day or two before that ship was leaving, I think it was the Athenia was bombed by the German U-boats, and that was the path they were going to take. So it's like, it had to be a very difficult thing to get on a ship, knowing full well that you could have just been blown up like that ship was. And this was two or 3 days later that they left. So instead of going that route, they went up through Iceland, a much longer trip.
It's amazing, this incredibly interesting life that would not have been highlighted in the same way had you not found it through your Esherick research. And it sounds like there is more and more and more to tell, despite having this show. I'm curious if this is the particular relationships here are something that you are hoping to continue to research, to do work on, or whether there are things that are new and exciting to you in your work now, whether as an artist or as a researcher now that Daring Design is up and running.
Well, I'm working on a solo exhibition that's a year or two away, and I've been working on pieces, and that is all new work, and I'm very excited about that. And I'm making things that are very pleasing to me, which, as an artist, if you can say that and mean it, it doesn't get any better than that. So I'm really thrilled about that. As far as the research, it's kind of like, I didn't anticipate doing this thing for Glencairn, but they were insistent upon it because they thought that it would be the right time to do it, to help give more exposure to the museum at the, to the Michener Museum for the show there. And it ties in other aspects, the later, after 1945. So that's sort of the next phase and involving the Pitcairns and so on. And so while it wasn't what I thought maybe this would be next year, I was ready to get back to doing my work, and I just was launched into another thing, and I had a month to come up with the essay, and for the Michener show, I had years, so it was a totally different thing. And one of the grandchildren of Hanna had a lot of the earlier work. I had seen some of these pieces, this figure on the left here, but it didn't pertain because it's not from 1930 to 1945. So I went back there and said, I needed to see this. I wanted to see all the other stuff. And then all of a sudden, there is the early Hanna before the brackets for the Daring Design exhibition.
So you have ways to sort of expand the story and get in, work outside of the time frame that the Michener sort of limited you to. And at the same time, you're doing all of this work, new work for this exhibition. And I'm curious if your work as a researcher, and the way that you go about solving research problems intersects with or mirrors the way that you approach a creative problem in your own practice. Are there parallels there, or are they totally different processes for you?
Well, they are very different. I mean, one of the things that I've always been
do that again, it'll run away.
Oh, I'll just ask folks to mute themselves if they haven't done so already. Thank you.
Scott Luxon. So they're very different. It's just, I try to be organized about it. I mean, one of the things that is a trait of mine, which works really well for me, is being organized. And as an artist, that's a very unusual thing. Like maybe 5% of artists are organized, and that might be generous. I don't think it's even that many. So, I track things. I have a very good record of all the pieces that I've ever made since 1972. And I'm organized about, the information, trying to keep it all together so that I can refer to it down the road and so on. But it's just different. It's collecting. When I was young, I had probably, like a lot of other people, a stamp collection, a coin collection, and baseball cards. And I sort of continued them in through as an adult, the baseball cards in particular, until 1994, when they went on strike. And then that was the end of that. So I just said, okay, I don't need this anymore. It's out of my life. But I don't know, I've always enjoyed organizing things, and, that helped me with my own work. And so with with research, it's more about asking the questions with an open mind to what the answers might be, like not trying to come up with a narrative from the beginning, just take in stuff. And it's like, oh, well, what are the questions to ask, So I knew I would have X amount of time with people, and they were just all things I wanted to know. I wanted to know what they knew about this or that. And So I think they are different. I have a lot of different interests, and that's, one that I never would have suspected, that both writing and researching. And the only reason that I can write is my wife, because she's my editor, and she takes my garbled mess and makes it into something that makes sense. And
A good editor is worth their weight in gold. So you're lucky to have one in-house.
yes. So,
Well,
yeah.
Mark, I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the folks who are on the program today. But I want to, just first thank you so much for sharing your research and your time, and all of the work and the process behind putting this really magnificent exhibition together. I hope that if folks haven't had a chance to see it, you will take the opportunity to get out to the Michener before the show closes in February. It's really
February 6th. Actually.
Yeah. So, okay. So you don't have much of February to go, but certainly the opportunity to see objects that are really rarely out for public consumption is a very exciting one.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question here in the chat. If other folks would like to put questions in the chat, you're welcome. This is a comment here. Do a show out at the West Coast, Mark. from Sandy. While you're thinking about a response to that, I'll just let everyone know that they can put questions or comments in the chat, or if there's a lull, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question directly.
I don't know what to say about the West Coast. I like the West Coast.
Well, I'm curious, Sandy, a show of Esherick and the research related to that, or a Mark Sfirri solo exhibition, or one of each?
Let's go for it all.
Yeah.
we have Maloof out here. I live very close to the Maloof Foundation, so we could tie that in. Come on out.
Sure.
You can
Sounds
always
great.
stay here. Got plenty of room.
Okay. Sounds great.
The next project is on the way.
Yes.
All right, so we've got a question from Rob. Hi, Mark. Just curious, do you have one or two key clients who have influenced your own work? What a fantastic question, Rob. Do you have your own Helene Fischer?
I do. I have a couple, and that's been great. I guess I shouldn't say names, but they have been very supportive, and without people buying work, it's it's hard to keep going. It's just it spurs you on to do the next thing. So that's been great. And I kind of go at my own pace about trying out new things unless I'm asked. Like, I don't do furniture unless it's commissioned anymore, because I just don't have the space to hold it. There's a collector in DC, I'll say her name, Fleur Bressler, who isn't collecting anymore. She's 95 now, but she was collecting pieces throughout my career and commissioning furniture with an open end, and it was very freeing, to just be able to do that. To make work for her, and span both turning and furniture. Very few people have done both, but there is one local collector too who's been very supportive, and I'm not sure if she would let me tell her name, so I'm a little gun shy on that, but so.
Well, I'm curious too, knowing that one of the pieces from the Esherick Museum archives that shows up in the exhibition is this sort of letter back and forth with Marjorie Content, where they are sort of going back and forth on design and sort of dimensions. And I'm curious if you have clients who you work with in that sort of depth, or is it more of a commission and you get to provide the response kind of situation?
Well, one commission I had was a folding screen, which was painted by me, and the only one that I've done, and for this person in DC. And I had a basic design that I was thrilled about. And then she asked what the colors were going to be. And I thought, I said, I guess I better make some panels and try different combinations. And I made 5 of them. And then I thought, well, which of these would I want to make? And 3 of them I wanted to make. I didn't want to make the other two. So on the one hand, it would be great to say, oh, I did 5 different examples here. Which one would you like? Because what if it's one of the ones that I didn't want to do, and then spend hundreds of hours working on, a solution. So I only gave her 3. And it was, I don't care, I like them all. And so she picked the one that she wanted. And then there was a painted border to it as well. And I was going to do just a sort of red and white squares along the edge of it. And she didn't like that. And I'm thinking, okay. So I made up little samples of other possibilities and was much more thrilled about them. They kind of look like a coral snake or something like that. And so that was kind of working with her on that. Nobody that it's too specific about. Other than that, certain parameters, like there was a hall table that this is how big, this is how deep, and then it was sort of up to me what I wanted to do. So
I actually think, Mark, that screen commission was what you were working on in your studio when I had a chance to visit you last, but in pre-pandemic times. So
yes,
it's a nice callback to that wonderful visit. Laura has some questions. Hi, Laura. It's glad you're here. Is asking about Esherick's continued collaborations later in his life, and also what's next for you in your research work, Mark.
Later, collaborations. I mean, he worked with different clients, and it's sort of like if they bought one piece, then it expanded to another and another and another. It wasn't. There are very few collectors of Esherick pieces that have other people's work. The Rubinsons, great example. They just kept every year. They kept buying. The Dannenbergs. There are many families that it seemed to be the case. Like Esherick was their friend and their woodworker. I've only seen one collection that the people wanted a different thing. They wanted something by Esherick, they wanted something by Paul Evans, and I've never seen that. Now, eclectic is big, you could have that, you could mix it. And Nakashima, they had like one of all these different people, and they had opinions about the makers because they wanted to meet them. And I thought that was really interesting, but very unusual for a collector to do that. So, and what was the other half of the question?
What's next in your research career?
Oh, I don't have anything planned. If I have to be really interested in it. I don't want somebody to tell me what to do. I'd rather, so if something comes up, I would love to be a part of it. Or if it, inspires me, I will. There are other makers that I've had interest in doing research on, like Miriam Carpenter. I wrote an article about her. Stephen Hogben, somebody that I've had a lot of respect for since I ever saw his work in the late 70s, I guess. And he and I are good friends. And, there might be some other things, but the primary one is Esherick. And, if something new surfaces, it might be a reason to connect with other things, but I don't really have any plans. I had no plans of doing further research with Hanna, but somebody suggested it, and I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll jump in, and it's been great because it really forced me to help complete that picture of her and her life for Glencairn, because what they knew about was Hanna Binder, who was made nativity scenes or nativity figures that were for both the Pitcairns and for Eisenhower, and that's a big deal. And that's one thing, but I didn't even know about that. I just knew about 1931 or 30, and so seeing more of the early stuff. And in the article for Glencairn that I did, I have a painting she did when she was 15 that with figures, 2 faces, her and her sister, I think. And it really shows that she had the talent and the interest to produce art, and at a quite early age. So,
well, and I think that's fantastic, right? That by putting your research out into the world, more questions come back at you, and opportunities, and the show's run at the Michener isn't over yet, so who knows? Maybe Sandy will have a question to to lead the way, since she's already made the overture. But it'll be exciting to see where you go next.
Let me point one more thing out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did this as a combination. This is a ivory figure she did probably in the 20s. And it's in the family. Grandson of Hanna has it. And I used it. In fact, I used this combination of pictures together because the figures are about the same size. So here she is carving in ivory, and on the right, she's carving in dogwood, and the heads are about the same size. She was, that was a familiar size to her, or smaller. But this piece, if you can see it, there's an armband on her arm. And while I had it, I thought, why does she have an armband on? And I went and I twisted it and it unscrewed.
Oh my goodness.
Because the ivory it's beautifully done. But right here, you can unscrew the arm, and in the upper arm, there's a brass bolt sticking out. And in this part, there's a, it's threaded to accommodate, and then it spins on and then it becomes right into that position. So, and it's beautifully executed. To carve is one thing, but to, that's a mechanical thing that needed to be done. And also this one, the fact that this connection, I don't know how she put it together, but it just spins just perfectly, rotates perfectly on that center point. Anyway.
It's fantastic. It really is a testament to, when you do research in an archive, or when you do research with textual stuff, or even in conversation, you learn something and then you learn something totally different. Right. When you are with an object, learning from it and, and allowing that to be essentially your text that you're researching, right? And so your work really, all the texts are valid, right? You've got the object text, you've got the text, you've got the oral history, and you've really managed to weave together some fascinating stories from finding the important parts of all of those things. And I want to call attention to Sandy's comment here to thank you for showcasing women artists in particular. And, Sandy, if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that, Laura spoke about that as well in her talk about this exhibition. So it's very exciting to see those narratives expanded. I want to thank you again, Mark, for joining us today. Thanks to everyone who came to the conversation and contributed and spent some time with us this afternoon. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with all sorts of links to everything that Mark mentioned and everything that's linked in the chat, but also some of the links that we haven't had a chance to put in there yet. So your research journeys are just beginning if you care to delve in deeper to these stories and these narratives. And we hope to see you both at the Michener for the Daring Design Show, and certainly welcome at the Esherick whenever you're able to stop and visit us. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you. And yes, you have to go to the Wharton Esherick Museum. It's an amazing place. Many times.
We often unmute and just say goodbye as we're leaving. So if you feel the spirit, if you're moved, please let us know.
Thank you.
Bravo. Well done. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.